Hey there, my name is Joe Keyport, and you're listening to the Ear Coffee Podcast. This week, I catch up with Andy Angstrom of Steady Range. For longtime listeners of the podcast, you recognize the band under a different name, Fragile Canyons. Well, after frequent misspellings on show posters and a couple-year hiatus due to the pandemic and work, the band is back under the banner Steady Range and released their new album, Matamidi Bound, in July of this year. For fans of Fragile Canyons, you'll still have a little bit of that indie rock twang, but with a different lens, something a little more jammy, a little more country, a little more Dead influenced. It was great to catch up with Andy, and that's all right here on the Ear Coffee Podcast. Andy, how's it going?
Doing well. How are you, Joe?
Doing well. I'm glad you could join me. And Andy, you're no stranger to the podcast. You were here for a similar reason, just a different name. People would know you performed previously with Fragile Canyons. Name change. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a little bit. So first, do you want to just kind of introduce yourself and kind of how would you describe Steady Range to people who, you know, typically it's non-music people and they're like, oh, you're in a band? What's your band like? What's that line?
Yeah. So I'm Andy. So I play guitar, piano, I sing, and then I write all the songs in Steady Range, formerly known as Fragile Canyons, maybe also formerly known as Fragile Crayons to some people who didn't have the name right. So we formed back in 2017. So it was kind of a solo thing. Then we formed as a band, me, Noah, and Chase, had a couple different guitarists. Eventually, Nick kind of joined around 2018, and that was sort of the core group. So then we had 3-year hiatus, came back under the new name. I would say if people maybe were a fan before and now they're listening to this stuff, I'd say we went more kind of indie rock to more of a dad rock sound. Okay. But I think, you know, for folks, very like Dead-ish, very Ween-ish, kind of like, I would say sort of the dad rock elements, maybe a little like Dr. Dog sprinkled in there. But Ween, the weird stuff of the Beatles is probably like the two areas where the band finds the most commonality.
Okay. Well, awesome. No, totally. And so why change the name? You mentioned you had the 3-year hiatus. You weren't in the country for those 3 years. So why, when you came back, why did you decide to change the name of the project?
Yeah. So when we first were doing our thing, so we formed around like 2017, and I kind of feel like similar to most local bands, we were sort of rising the ranks of like more and more of our friends were showing up to shows, but struggling to sort of break out of the like, do people who don't know us personally actually listen to this band? And I felt like towards the very end, before I moved, we were just starting to kind of like get there. Like we're getting some good write-ups. We're getting played on the radio. We got to play Big Turn. And I think at Big Turn was the moment, because that was in 2020 in February. Yeah. And good turnout, big gig, playing a festival. Our name was wrong on the sign. And then as I was walking around during the festival, I was hearing people saying like, oh, I'm going to go see Fragile Crayons tomorrow. I heard they're really good. And so I think at that moment I was like, this is just like a dead end, because like it's unfortunate that no one ever gets this name right, but like I don't know what it is. But I remember at that show I was like, if we keep doing this, like something has to change. Then like world shut down. I moved to Switzerland for my job for 3 years, and then I kind of like I didn't really know where life was going to go at that point. And then as we reformed, like we weren't really planning to be a band. We were just kind of jamming, but I really said like, if we're going to do something, this is a good moment to get rid of the name and start fresh. I didn't have any issues with the name, but like, I don't think anyone ever got it right. I don't think our name was ever right on any sign. So I said, this is a moment to kill it and move on.
That's fair. Was it easy to let go of kind of you said it was a kind of a point of frustration for you, you know, when it came to posters or people getting it. So it was pretty easy to just let go of that identity and reform.
I think it was more, I think the bigger thing was like when we kind of started talking, us four, I think the question was like, are we going to lose a bunch of steam from like whatever we had before if we changed the name? My impression was like, well, we weren't like huge before. And then the thing, as I noticed, was like the scene is so different from when I left. I mean, like so many people that were doing this before are not doing music. Like a lot of the bookers don't work in town anymore and they've moved on to other jobs. So to me, like even coming back, it's like it felt like regardless, we're kind of starting almost at square one. And I think to me, like it's weird to go into like, because we kind of moved into this, we're going to make a record. And once you decide to do it, it's like you're going to put so much time, so much money, like so much investment in this. Like, do I want to do that knowing that we're going to kind of cap out at this, like, probably our friends will listen and it's going to be tough to get other people because they don't get the name right anyways. So at this, it's like the risk of whatever we lose up front, like the benefit of having a name that hopefully people, and I've checked it a couple of times, people said they're not getting it wrong and they can read it correctly. So I think it's good. Yeah. But it felt like it was the right time to do it. I didn't really have I had a connection to the people. The name was just kind of a name. I didn't really care about the name.
That's so fair. I did want to ask, coming home, what was it like? You mentioned the scene just felt different once you kind of came back. What was your, those first few shows back? Did you just feel that different overall, or was it just more you're seeing different people, new people, and hearing about new bands?
Yeah, I think it was really, it felt like I definitely became what I felt like, there's like a new generation of people coming, like people who are like 24 years old, who are doing their thing, getting big, which is awesome. And I am definitely on sort of the second wave of it. So it felt like a lot of the bands who I would deem as like popular or on the cusp before I moved, like they either disappeared or it's like they kind of lost track of where they're at. And then some bands like I think my friend Sam's band Harlow, like it really felt like they were almost like this kind of post-COVID, like this is sort of the new scene of bands, right? Like bands that like they didn't really exist before COVID, and now there's all these new bands that are like playing the big festivals and like doing really well, which is awesome. But so like it wasn't a negative thing. I think it was just like the familiar faces were just kind of gone, and especially for me coming back, I think like the ecosystem, right? Like City Pages going away and a lot of bookers like moving out, venues changing, like that all to me, like coming back as just doing local music, it was so weird to kind of figure out like who's doing what at that point. The whole though, like, I don't know, there's such a thread of like a music culture in the city though. I think what's cool is like it doesn't feel like it's less active. It feels like there's like just as many bands that were doing it before. For me, though, it's such a different environment of being amongst like a slightly older crew of people doing it. And I feel like that crew is much more of like, they're doing it because they like to do it. There isn't this ulterior motive of like, I think they do it for fun. And if they're successful, that's great. But I think in the 20s, there's much more of that, like, who's going to make it, who's not going to make it, like a little bit more of that competitive spirit where it feels much more kind of communal in your 30s.
That's fair. Yeah. No, it's an interesting perspective that I didn't think about. Kind of that you kind of, it doesn't feel like you maybe missed your shot, but you're just kind of less about, you just want to make art to keep at something you love, as opposed to we need to grind as hard as we can to try and find that foothold or whatever,
Well, yeah. And like, I think it's always, I think also coming back to it, and I think where the thread kind of comes from is like, I also feel like I feel like this music is better than it was before. Like, I think the nice thing about having the same crew is like, it doesn't feel like we're relearning, but it kind of feels like, oh, we're taking where we stopped with the last EP and then like continuing to work it, which is always been the thing with us of like, I think to me, the music has to be super good. And if we're not big, like that doesn't really matter. It's like, I want to make something that I feel is really good shit. And then if the other things don't work out, sorry if I'm not supposed to swear on this thing, but
you're good.
Like that's where I think for us, that's been the really nice commonality of bringing it back is like, let's make some really good stuff. And also let's make sure we're making something that doesn't sound like what it was before, like trying to challenge it and try something new. So yeah, it's different, but then like a lot of the folks we were like our friends that were in the scene are still kind of doing it, and I think that's been super fun.
Yeah, totally. And you mentioned originally, you're just kind of jamming and weren't planning to restart the band. Was it pretty easy to have that conversation to be like, no, we should be playing and writing music in front of people again? Or how did the band, feel overall? Or what did that discussion look like?
Yeah. So I think for me, like where it kind of came from was, I think when we finished back in 2020 and I had moved, I was super burnt out by it. And I think burnt out because it was like so much self-promotion. There's so much like booking gigs, trying to get people to show up to gigs, like tracking down a poster, like all those things, responding to constant emails of like getting dates booked, having to think ahead. Once it was done, like COVID was kind of a nice break from it. I was like, I don't know if I'm even going to want to do this ever again. And so I started doing like solo electronic music when I was living in Switzerland. And that was, it was fun. Like it was like a good time and I liked doing that. But then it was especially like when I was living in Switzerland, I joined this band called the Flamingos. Shout out to the Flamingos. They're still doing their thing. And coming back to play with them, it was such like I missed this of like just playing with other people. Like I think that when you have a life in music, it's kind of like, it's almost like a kickball league or something. It's like, this is how you like get together and hang with people. And I think I forgot like how much that just means to me, how much it kind of fills my cup and I enjoy it. And I think when I got burnt out from it originally, it's like I got burnt out from all the stuff that I didn't really need to be doing as much of. And I thought I had to be doing it. And I think for me, it was like getting back and playing and just like making something and hanging out. That's ultimately what I missed, was like these guys and just making the music. And I think it kind of took playing with this band in Switzerland to relearn it. So then when I came back, all my gear was coming on a boat. So that took forever because I got here before my gear. But then the first couple times, like I hadn't like written a song on a guitar in 4 years.
Wow.
So we just were like kind of playing. And then the other piece of it was like, I have like a kid now, so I'm busy. And so I used to sit and like write songs I would like work a song and like construct everything. And then what we started doing is like, I would think of a melody while I'm out pushing the stroller and just like sing it into my phone and then like show up to band practice and be like, I have this little tiny idea. Like, could we turn this into something? And that was not like, we're going to make a record. Like we just started kind of making songs that way of like, could this little riff be something? Could this little groove turn into something? And kind of just like jamming again. And I think before we had moved and like before I'd moved down to Switzerland, it was like 99. I mean, like you play in a band, so you know, it's like 99% of the time you spend together is often like rehearsing for like a thing. And it can make you lose sight of like the creation of like making something and like doing something where you're just going to purely focus on trying to make something cool and not like putting a set list together because you have to go do this thing. So that we fully focus on that. And I think it was probably Nick was like, so what are we doing? Are we just going to keep doing this? And I was like, I don't really know. And so then so I've got, my wife's pregnant with our second kid. So she's due in August. The drummer Chase, he's moving. We all kind of had some big life movements coming up. So I was like, let's at least make a record and we'll kind of figure out what we do from there. And let's try to play at least one show. And then from there, we'll kind of figure out what we do after that. So it became like all this just jamming, hanging out, making it kind of got whittled down to like, we're going to put this onto one record, do this thing, and then kind of like go from there and see where it goes. So it became very focused on just like a singular project.
Okay. Yeah. Just almost more of a trying to at least prove that it existed post, the move back as opposed,
Yeah. Well, and I think it was also like, I think if we didn't feel all that strongly about the material, I don't think like the three guys are very good filters. Like like there's so many like Steady Range / Fragile Canyon songs that end up in the trash where they're like, this doesn't work, or this sounds too much like a thing we've already done. So the fact that they were like excited about the material, I was like thinking, okay, there's something here. We should document it, release it, and then kind of go from there. But I just think that it was just very refreshing to be back in the space of making and jamming and not just rehearsing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and the record that came out of it is called Matamidai Bound. And so talk to me, you said you hadn't written a song, in 4 years on a guitar. So was this all new material when you came back, or did you have some of these things sitting around at least from when you were still in Switzerland, kind of going about your day?
Yeah, I had one song that I'd written in Switzerland on a guitar that sucked. So that one didn't end up on the record and we didn't do anything with it. But it was more, I think once like the ecosystem was there, like once we said, okay, like we're going to just start jamming and like we're just going to have this, and this became this kind of like social space. That's when to me the songs, and like songs not in the way I was writing them before, but like musical ideas started flowing of saying, I want to play a song on the piano, or I want to do something that's kind of more bluesy, or I want to do something that sounds like the Beatles, and less of like, I'm going to pull out my guitar and just like work something for hours until I've kind of figured out the perfect song and then give everyone their parts. Yeah. It was very like organic writing process of here's a riff, maybe a bridge. If it works, I'll start writing some lyrics. And so when we started doing that, I mean, we'd practice once a week, or really just jam. And I'd say usually every time I'd have like, it started as 0. And then I think once I knew that we were all into this, like the ideas just kind of started flowing in a cool way. So we ended up with 20, and then we took the 20 and then narrowed it down to 14. So there's 14 on the record. And these were just the ones where like, these kind of fit the most thematically. These are the most fun, the most different. So it was nice to have somewhere we could kind of like whittle it down and not just like everything we've got, we'll put it on the record.
Yeah, no, totally. And so Matamidai Bound, would you consider this a debut record since it's a new name, or what kind of, that's the question I had pondered all day today leading up to this is this officially a debut record in your opinion?
I think to me, it's the same people. The process felt it felt completely different than how I don't know if the other three would say that, but to me, like it was so much less, it was very social. It was very like, there was just a good energy. And I felt like it was a lot less of trying to just bang out these songs that I written. And then I think really for me, and I'm not answering your question very directly, but like, I think the way it almost felt like a debut record was that like the writing process was very, very different. I'd never written songs in this approach before. And I think that the writing is better than it was I think it's better. And I think it's more, I don't know how to describe it. Like, it feels a little bit more just like me. I think the other stuff is a little bit like, I think if you listen to the two, there's probably some commonality that you can hear of like our playing and that, but I think there's a continuation there. But it feels like a new chapter. So I would maybe say it's of the same book, but a new chapter. So maybe not a debut record.
Okay, gotcha. No, I was like, yeah, I was fully ready to say yes, new debut record, new project, despite similar members. But I'll take that one as well. And so talk to me about kind of what you were putting into these songs, kind of listening through it. I don't know if I'd call it a concept record in the sense, but from what I know of your writing, you are very almost conceptual and kind of world building within the context of that album, even if it's not all like a top to bottom story. So what were you kind of writing about, and what were you kind of putting into these songs? When putting together these 14-ish tracks.
Yeah. So there was no like, I think the way I wasn't really thinking about it thematically because like I don't think I realized until sort of the end of what they all kind of maybe fit together as. But I think the way they had flowed out was almost like it was more I wanted to just bring something so that as we're jamming, we just have kind of something to bite off and chew and sort of like play around with. I didn't even really think like, oh, this is going to be a song. But the way like how they all kind of fit together. So I think like this space I got into during COVID or even kind of post COVID when I was in Switzerland was the first song that was on this record that we put as a single, this one called Trust Fall. And that song was actually, I wrote it once I got here, but I wrote it about was I had tried writing this book when I was in Switzerland. And it was going to be a road trip novel about this group of conspiracy theorists. And the concept was, and it got to like 300 pages, but about like halfway through, I realized that like this is it's a total disaster. It's not going anywhere. But I was like enjoying writing. It was like I was just like having fun making things up, thinking of things that would make me laugh, or like ideas I kind of wanted to chase down. That it became just like I'm making this to make it. I'm making it because I'm having like a good time and it's enjoyable and it's fulfilling. I'm not making it because I'm thinking about giving it to somebody. Yeah. So that book still exists on my Google Drive. It will get thrown in the trash soon. But I think that space of like that headspace informed a lot of the writing of these, where I wasn't thinking about how are we going to play it live, or like how will we record it, or will people. It was like I want us to have a good time and like play something that is sort of fun. And I think so that was kind of like how the writing space came from Trust Fall, and that was how a lot of it came through, was like trying out new grooves and new ways, and then kind of just writing about stuff that like either made me kind of laugh or just like these ideas that I wanted to feel very fresh. And I think where I was writing before with Fragile Canyons, it was a lot of songs where I was really more like regurgitating stuff, so like quoting other writers, or like kind of writing a song about an article I had read, or like things like where this was like, it felt very pure, that it's like, this is out of my brain, like this is like something that I have thought of. And so like a little bit goofier, some of them are a little more vague, but like that's kind of how a lot of it came through. And then like the Madamidai bound title, so the first one we did together was a song called Madamidai, which is the first song on the album. And I was like, I was really obsessed with the song Margaritaville by Jimmy Buffett for a while. Okay. And like, mostly because like, it wasn't a real place when he's writing about an idea of a place. And I became very obsessed with like writing about places, but they're not actually like they're actually just, he's describing feelings that he has, or like desires, but he's talking about a physical place that doesn't exist. And I thought that was like so cool. I think I've like studied Margaritaville more than Jimmy Buffett did himself. And I thought like that is such an interesting thing. Like, and then I was thinking about like us playing as a band. It's like, this almost feels like my Margaritaville, where it's like this band has now become a thing where it's like I relax. It's like a place that I explore. It's a place where I have fun. It's not this thing that I have to go think of gigs for. I have to like plan, and it's like I can just go to this space and have a good time. So Madamidai bound, the song, and like the album and the song are kind of like the ultimate theme of it, which is that Madamidai sort of represented like the Margaritaville for me. So the lyrics are about like seeing your friends, having a nice time, like gathering together. And so that's where, and I think a lot of the other songs kind of fit in that theme too.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, it makes sense. No, I enjoy you mentioning Margaritaville and kind of how it was, the fact that it didn't exist, and it was more of a state of mind, very separately, but kind of in the same idea. Have you seen the stand-up bit about Margaritaville?
Yeah,
by Kyle Kinane.
It's Kyle Kinane, right?
Yeah. It's and how it's the saddest place in the world, actually.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, if you were to write it now, it would be incredibly depressing.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's so good. I recommend it if those listening want to just have a funny 5 minutes.
Yes.
But so with Matamidai Bound, you do a lot of local references, even if it's not local places, you're specifically writing about, Roseville and Matamidai obviously is another city, and I'd have to look through the list of some other things. Talk to me about kind of how you went about inserting that. Is that something you kind of, when you're writing, you think about kind of these places and times, and are they more autobiographical, or is it just more, I want to place it in something we all kind of can put a reference to make it almost feel a little more tangible?
Yeah, I think I hadn't really used location a lot. Like it became this very fresh writing space because I hadn't done that before. And I think honestly, it became like we would kind of get a groove going, and I wouldn't really know I'd always wrote the lyrics after. And then Matamidai, like literally I knew I wanted it to be about a place and I needed 4 syllables. So I literally just looked at a map. I was like, okay, where is a town with 4? And then Matamidai like had such a nice roll off the top, like it felt good to sing it. And the same with, it kind of like, it became the same with a lot of the songs. So then Roseville was very similar where, I was listening to this song, this guy, Doug Somm, who wrote the song called Mendocino. And like, I don't really know what that town is like. Like it could be a total dump. I have no idea, but he makes it sound like so cool. And I was like, as I was listening to the groove on that song, I was driving around because we had recorded at band practice. I was thinking like, what could this song be about? What could I sing about? I was driving through Roseville. I live in St. Paul, so it's close by. And I was like, this town, if you don't live here, like what it is sounds so different than what the name of the town is. And it made me laugh like super hard thinking about like, what if this guy, like his girlfriend leaves him because she loves the town of Roseville so much. And if you weren't from here, it like probably sounds maybe normal, but if you're from here, it's insane.
It's a shopping center. You're like,
it's like, it is the most like boring, like there's nothing. I don't mean to talk crap on Rose, but like the way it's described in the song, if you weren't from here, it could sound totally legitimate. So I was laughing about that of like, could I make something where someone who isn't from here would think it's a totally legit song? If you're from here, it's just hilarious.
Yeah, that's funny. I like that. You mentioned the novel, and you said, did it influence anything else in kind of the album, or was it mostly just the one song? And kind of how did you feel maybe that, I won't call it a failed project, but a project that you're okay getting rid of and not finishing, how did that impact this album beyond Trustfall?
Yeah, I think where it was when I wrote that book, and then actually I'd written this other book that was kind of at the start of COVID. Chase always makes fun of me because the book I wrote is only 50 pages long. And so he's like, well, it's not really, it's like, I don't know if you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, but there's this whole bit on like Jason Alexander writes a book about acting, but it's only like 30 pages long. And Larry's like, well, it's really more of a pamphlet.
Yeah.
He says I wrote a pamphlet. I didn't really write a book. But so when I wrote it though, like I was having so much fun writing. And then when I was writing the other book, I was having a lot of fun. And when I'd write for Fragile Cans, like the lyrics were a chore. It was like I had to think of, and I always felt like I was like studying and I had to find something interesting to write about. It was almost like writing a paper. And so I think a lot of it became like, what would be fun to write? Like, what would I like to write about? What's something that is maybe not like interesting, but it makes me like a song about Roseville to me is hilarious. It might not be for somebody else, but then I think where the writing kind of came from before and where the book really helped me was, I think before I kind of viewed the lyrics of like, I want people to think I'm well read, or like that I have an interesting idea, or like I have something to say. And I think the idea of having something to say, I think is like kind of ridiculous, because it's like they don't need like the news regurgitated stuff, right? And like I think that people like especially if you think about writers like Dylan or Lennon, where they almost like purposefully were ambiguous. Like they almost like avoided being understood, but it actually made their music almost more not smart, but like the listener could live in it because there wasn't this definitive meaning to everything. And so I just felt like writing more about things I felt or a vibe or like something where the songs before were like, this is this specific idea. I'm going to take you from point A to point B through the lyrics. I just found that to be so stressful and boring and so tedious. And then this of like, imagine a guy getting dumped by his girlfriend because she fell in love with the town of Roseville. Like I all these ideas floated out. It became very fun to write it. Same with Trustfall, like writing about the process was kind of a good reflective of like what was so fun about writing that book. Why did I enjoy it? And also why will I never give it to anybody? Why is it going to end up in the trash?
Yeah, no. Well, and I kind of on your point of, some of these timeless songs that are very ambiguous. I was talking with one of my friends about, how there's been some of these songs that reference social media or talking about the timeline or kind of in there. And it almost feels like you're instantly dating your work. And there's a reason why you think of even like protest song, especially if they've referenced something very specific like Vietnam, they become part of history within, 10 years. It's no longer a song that can feel relevant. You're like, okay, that's just about that time. That isn't a thing anymore.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. Like, I think that, I think it's one of those things of like the medium is actually extremely interactive. And I think that sometimes, especially I think as like a local musician, you can get a little wrapped up in like, I am almost presenting local music, which like I'm not describing this well, but like you're thinking about who is likely going to listen to something, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, like the timeless songs are sort of written that what if everybody listened to it? Like it's like a very general idea. And so I think that some of those, like to have something where people can kind of live in there and be able to interpret it. But then, it's interesting though too, because I think that like oftentimes I think a lot of the great like writers throughout time actually I think had a tough time making a real statement. I think oftentimes like a real statement can feel very corny, like to say like, this is what you should do out of this, or like, here's my statement. To your example on protest songs, like it can almost feel like once the movement is done, the song is also done. Where I think for songs, like I think people criticize Paul McCartney for that he never really like said anything. He's often just like singing about feelings or emotions. But I think the more often he tried to say something, that's the worse he sounded. Like he was trying to get you to think something and like, that's when you start to get into that, like, I know like Norm Macdonald talks about as a comedian of like, the goal is to laugh. The goal is not for me to like teach you something. It's like, remember what the medium you're working in, like music is something that I'd hope people are like enjoying and listening to the thing. And I would assume not listening to like be educated. Maybe in some ways they are, but I would hope people have other mediums to do that. It's not a very efficient medium to be learning.
Yeah, well, exactly. And you'd hope if they're trying to take something out of it, you can lead them to their own conclusions as opposed to telling them, what they should feel or what they should think is throughout the song.
Yes. Yeah. Like just if you describe the feeling or the process of it, then it's a little bit less of, because then it's just immediately they can disagree with it, and then that kind of makes listening to a song very strange.
Yeah. I'm listening to something I don't agree with is a really funny, almost kind of pouty experience. So talk to me about going into the studio and recording this. You went into Casino Time. Was it?
Yeah.
You've been into the probably studios before with Fragile Canyon's work on your previous releases. So was it kind of business as usual, working with people or what was this experience like?
Yeah, we had done, this is our third time working with McCoy. So we did the Fragile Canyons EP, Here It Is. We did Lavender, and then we've done this one with him. Bunch of our friends recorded there. I think for us, like our approach is always, I tend to think that we go in there with like a pretty darn good idea of what we're trying to do, because we're always trying to do a lot and we're always trying to do it in a small amount of time. So we try to practice a lot going in so that the recording process is super seamless. And what I loved about the first time working with McCoy is that like he's super fast and he has a very like pragmatic, quick energy to getting things done, getting things set up, and super open-minded. Like if you have something ambiguous, he can kind of figure it out quickly. And he doesn't talk a lot in the studio, which like I think sounds maybe negative, but like you're a musician too. Like when you're in there and you're in the zone, like you don't want to lose the magic. Like you want to just start working. And he's very good at like when it's go time, he turns the mics on, we get it going. So once we came back and we had a batch of songs, we were like, we got to do it with McCoy. There's no like, it worked so well the last 2 times. He's a friend. The space is great. I think he makes really good stuff. He does a bunch of like the human stuff, Harlow stuff. He's in Dot Operator. Like he makes all this really good stuff. Yeah. Is this thing on? Like there's all these great bands that record there. So the space is great. He's got good gear. Really like what I kind of talked to him about, and I love his open-minded. So I was like, we have 20 songs. We're hoping to consolidate them, and we're hoping to just get a bunch of them done and like keep it loose, scrappy. I gave him a couple reference points of kind of here's what I'm going for, but I don't exactly know. And I think he's just a really good like quarterback. So how we did it, we did Here It Is all live track, and then Lavender, we did everything to a click and all separate, which I think some folks, it's like, it can feel a little bit less interactive. I think the benefit for us is like, it was just so efficient. It felt like we could each kind of hone in on our parts. It can make it a little bit tighter, where I felt like with the live track, it took so much time to like get everything set up. I almost felt like I lost some of that momentum going in there. But then I mean, I'm trying to think of the total days, because I did my basics, and then Chase, Noah, and Nick, I think all of them did all of their parts in one day. Because I was like, I'm going to Florida for vacation. If you guys have this day free to record, you should go. And at the end of the day, they text me like, yeah, it's all done. So it was super fast. And then, yeah, we got 14 done. And it was just super fun. I mean, we did a lot of experimentation, tried a lot of stuff. There's a lot of kazoo on it. Nick did a lot of mandolin. Like there's a lot of things where we just were like, I think we're having fun in a way that was like, we weren't going overboard with it, but I would say there was the right amount of like, we had fun without turning it into a complete mess. First we made like good basic tracks, and then we started messing around and doing stupid things.
I love the amount of kazoo I heard on this record. It's not an instrument you hear often, and when you do, it's just a chef's kiss moment, especially for that final song.
Yes, it's a very piercing. The good thing is everyone can play it. Like there's no onboarding to like figure it out. We all know how to do it.
That's awesome. Just a few more questions here. So obviously we like to give everyone a chance to talk about some of their favorite local or even regional bands that people should check out. Sometimes they like to pull out the Spotify playlist to see who they've been listening to recently. So for you, who's kind of locally or regionally some people you should our listeners should know about and be listening to?
Yeah, for sure. Well, so we're sharing a bill for the release show. We're playing with Alexander and Aly and Dot Operator. So Alexander and Aly, they just put out their first new record, I think in like 5 years, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, we went. Aly and I were at their first show back in like 4 or 5 years, and it was the best time.
Yeah. So Noah and Wilson, we kind of had like a crazy circumstance where they played in Duluth, and I think it was like my high school friend was working sound at their gig, recommended that they reach out to us. And so then we played a show. I kind of met them through music, but then I just think that record is so cool. I mean, they put so much work into it, and it's so layered. And I think oftentimes like local bands tend to do things a little bit like faster. And I think that like how much time they took, how layered it is, how complex the album is. I just thought like that one totally blew me away. One of my favorite, like I love their last one too, but that one, like there was just so much to it. Each song had so many different cool little dynamics. So that one was just super rich. I love all the Dot Operator stuff. Like I think McCoy has such a great writing ability. He used to play in this band called Wild Age, and that was when I first met him. And just a cool approach to writing. I think his production is totally taken off. This band, I'm actually wearing my Human shirt, so I love them. They're also great. Everyone that records at Casino Time, so like, Is This Thing On, Dot Operator, Human, Harlow, I love. I like Sam. I was a huge fan of his old band. I think Harlow is super cool. I think they've got an awesome sound. And then Wish Wash, they just came out with something like a week ago.
Okay.
And I thought that record sounded awesome. So we played with them back when they were called Witch Watch.
Yep.
Now they're Wish Wash. I don't know what, you'll have to ask them about that name change, but that record is great. And then our guitarist / piano player, Nick, he does like a jazz trio called Big Blue Moon. They're great. They've got some live recordings up that I love. They sound really, really nice. And then the last thing I'll mention, my friend Matt Beachy, he plays by the name Oscar Tango. He plays in a band called Cassini, and then he plays in a band called Slow Clarity. And that, I love that because it's like, I love his music because my instincts with my music is always like to give people a hook or like a chorus or not to, and he has a very like experimental mindset to his music. So like I saw him open for William Tyler, and he just was like making an absolute racket on the electric guitar. And I was like, this is so, like, you got this huge gig and you're just freaking people out, which I think is like, if I was in that position, I'd be like, I've got to like, make this really clean, tight. Like I could give you, and it's like, he just completely goes off the chain, which I love. So I think all of his projects are super cool.
Awesome.
And I'm forgetting like a million.
Yeah, we could be here all night just kind of remembering some guys that are just make awesome music. Finally here, where can people find you? Where can they keep up to date with all things Steady Range? Probably
the Steady Range. It's Steady Range on Instagram, just that name. That's probably the best one. If you follow Bandcamp, all of that, everything comes out of there. Instagram's probably the best one. I would love, I want to figure out maybe an email list, because I feel like I'm getting more and more friends who are offline. And so I got to figure out, like, I guess they're offline, but they still use their email. So I got to figure out how to get like an email list or something going, because all my friends are getting older and they're all like getting off Instagram. So I don't know, maybe a mailing list or a pen pal club or something.
Yeah. What was it? Newsletters are coming back, I feel like. So you just got to get Undercurrent to just start sending everybody emails every week instead of just posting on a story.
Yes. I as an old man, I would love that.
Well, Andy, I appreciate it. Congrats on the new record. It's fantastic as always. So thanks for stopping by, and I hope your show on the 19th goes well.
Yes. Thanks so much for chatting, and great to catch up with you again.
You have been listening to the Ear Coffee Podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share so we can stand out against the sea of other music podcasts. You can find information and other important links in the show notes of this episode. If you would like to support us, please consider subscribing on Patreon for early access to live sessions and other bonus content. You can also subscribe to our Substack for a regular newsletter with reviews, ramblings, and anything else we have to say. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.